Stand back, everybody. The record falls tonight. Look at him go.
I believe you, he's right.
Hi, my name is Charles, and this is UK Nostalgia. What I want to talk about today are the foods your nan made that have quietly, almost invisibly disappeared from British life. Not recipes that got updated or modernised, the ones that simply stopped existing. No announcement, no farewell, no supermarket tribute display. One decade they were on every table in Britain, and the next they were gone. And once you hear what we lost, I promise you will be angry that nobody warned you sooner. Number 15, bread in dripping. After every Sunday roast, without exception, your nan did something nobody in this country does anymore. She took the roasting tin, still warm, still smelling of beef and caramelized juices, and poured every last drop of dripping into a ceramic pot. By Monday morning, it had set firm and pale, with a dark layer of savory jelly sitting at the bottom. That jelly was the prize. Pure, concentrated beef. The best part of the whole pot, spread cold on thick white bread. With a pinch of salt, bread and dripping was not a snack. It was a meal. The bread going slightly translucent, with the fat soaked through. In 1955, every family saved their dripping. It was not optional. Wasting the fat from a joint of beef would have been genuinely unthinkable. Then the 1970s happened. The British Heart Foundation spent the decade telling everyone that animal fat was killing them. Margarine manufacturers spent the same decade spending millions convincing the public their laboratory-made yellow block was a health food. The dripping pot disappeared from kitchens within a single generation. We replaced something ancient and delicious with something that tasted of nothing, and it later emerged. It was arguably worse for you anyway. I went down such a deep rabbit hole researching the history of dripping that my wife had to physically take my laptop away from me at midnight. What I found was an industry-funded campaign so thorough and so effective that an entire nation forgot a food it had eaten for 500 years. Your nan's dripping pot did not die of natural causes, it was pushed. Number 14, lardy cake. There are people alive today in Wiltshire and Oxfordshire who will tell you without a trace of embarrassment that lardy cake is the finest baked thing ever produced in England. I am not going to argue with them. Lardy cake is what happens when you take bread dough, layer it with lard, sugar and dried fruit, fold it, roll it, fold it again, and bake it until the bottom caramelizes into a dark, sticky, almost toffee-like crust. Dense, rich, chewy, sweet and savory all at once. The lard does something to the crumb that no butter or oil can replicate. In the market towns of the south of England, lardy cake was sold in every bakery as a staple, not a treat. Bakers made it on Fridays because lard was cheap. Leftover dough was always available, and working men needed something that would carry them through a Saturday of physical labor. The regional bakeries understood something supermarket bread departments never grasped. Some things do not scale. The caramelization happens in a specific tin, in a specific oven, tended by someone who knows what it looks like when it is right. The high street chains arrived in the 1980s with standardized products and 3-week shelf lives. Lardy cake has a shelf life measured in hours. It was never going to survive that world. Most people under 40 have never tasted it. That should bother all of us considerably more than it does. Number 13, Stargazy pie. I will be honest with you, the first time I saw a photograph of Stargazy pie, I was convinced it could not possibly be a real dish that real people ate voluntarily. I had to go and verify it myself. It is real. It is Cornish, and it is magnificent. Stargazy pie is made with whole pilchards baked under a short crust pastry lid, fish heads poking up through the pastry, eyes to the sky. The heads are not decoration. The oils and juices drain back down into the filling during baking, keeping everything underneath moist and deeply flavored. This was engineering as much as cooking. The dish comes from Mousehole in Cornwall, tied to the legend of Tom Bourcock. In the winter of 1590, storms had kept the fishing boats in harbour for weeks. The village was close to starving. On the 23rd of December, Tom Bourcock rowed out alone through violent seas and returned with enough fish to feed everyone. His catch was baked into a great pie, the fish heads left poking through the pastry so the whole village could see that the hunger was over, that someone had been brave enough to save them. Mousehole still celebrates Tom Bourcock's Eve every December the 23rd, but outside that one village, the dish has all but vanished. Pilchards fell out of fashion. The ritual that gave the food its meaning was too local and too strange to survive the homogenization of British eating. A whole village fed by one man's courage, and the meal they made to honor him is nearly extinct. Number 12. Peas pudding. Hot peas pudding, cold peas pudding in the pot, 9 days old. The nursery rhyme is so old that most people have forgotten it is describing real food that real people actually ate. 9 days old was not exaggeration. Peas pudding kept, that was the point. Dried split peas, soaked overnight, boiled until they collapse into a thick golden mush, seasoned with salt, pepper, and a knob of butter. In its purest form, it contains almost nothing. In its effect, it is one of the most satisfying things you will ever eat, alongside boiled bacon or a thick slice of ham. In the Northeast, peas pudding was sold by the tub from butchers' counters. Well into the 1980s, you took your own basin, carried it home warm, spread it on bread. The relationship between peas pudding and boiled ham is one of the great British food pairings. The sweetness of cured meat against the earthy depth of the peas, made for each other, eaten together for centuries. When the independent butchers of the Northeast closed through the 80s and 90s, peas pudding went with them. Supermarkets stocked it briefly in plastic tubs and it tasted of nothing. The real thing, warm from the butcher, golden and rough textured, has become almost impossible to find south of Newcastle. The North misses it. I think the rest of Britain should be ashamed it let it go. Number 11. Potted meat. Before refrigeration, before food safety legislation, before anyone thought to put the word artisan on a jar of anything, there was potted meat, and it was genius. The principle was beautifully simple. Take cooked meat, shred it down to nothing, season it heavily with salt, pepper, and mace, pack it tight into a small earthenware pot, and pour a thick layer of clarified butter over the top. The butter set solid as it cooled, forming a seal so complete that the meat beneath it kept for days, sometimes weeks, without a refrigerator in sight. Preserved protein, perfectly seasoned, ready to spread on bread at a moment's notice. No fuss, no equipment, no electricity required. Every corner shop in Britain stocked it. Every grocer had a row of little pots sitting on the counter. A working man could buy one for a few pence on a Monday and still be eating from it on Friday. Potted beef for the ordinary household, potted chicken for slightly grander tables, potted shrimps from Morecambe Bay for the lucky ones, pressed into little white pots and sent across the country in hampers, like something precious, which they were. Then two things dismantled it. Refrigeration arrived and changed how Britain thought about keeping food, and the food standards legislation of the 1960s began demanding declared shelf lives from every sealed product on a shop shelf. The small producers who had been making potted meat by hand for generations, the same way their fathers had made it, could not afford to comply with the new requirements. They closed quietly, one by one. The pots disappeared from counters and never came back. Here is what I find almost funny about that. If funny is the right word, the clarified butter seal kept food safe and delicious for 3 centuries. We replaced it with a plastic lid and a sticker that tells you to consume within 2 days. Progress. Number 10. Flummery. Flummery sounds like something a Victorian schoolmaster would accuse you of talking. It sounds, frankly, ridiculous, like something invented by a children's author to name a bumbling sidekick, which is a genuine shame, because flummery is one of the oldest, most quietly extraordinary puddings Britain ever produced, and almost nobody alive today knows it exists, let alone that their great-grandmother made it regularly and considered it no more remarkable than porridge. The original flummery, the version appearing in British cookbooks from the 1600s onward, was made from almost nothing. You soaked oats in cold water for 2 full days, then strained the liquid off and discarded the oats entirely. What remained was a thin, cloudy, starch-heavy water that looked completely unpromising. You boiled that liquid, stirring constantly until something extraordinary happened. It thickened, tightened, and set into a trembling, pale, slightly translucent shape somewhere between a blancmange and a jelly. Turned out onto a plate, it wobbled with a kind of improbable elegance. Served with cream, a drizzle of honey, or a splash of ale. Depending on the household and the occasion, the texture was the entire point. That yielding, quivering softness achieved with nothing beyond water, oats, thyme, and patience. No gelatine, no setting powder, no additional ingredient of any kind. Just the starch from the grain doing what starch does when you understand it properly. Here's the part I find genuinely remarkable. Flummery fed the poor because oats were among the cheapest things you could buy, and the long soak meant you were extracting something substantial from very little. But flummery also appeared regularly on aristocratic tables, at grand dinners, at the kind of meals where the food was meant to impress. Because that wobble, produced without any mechanical assistance, was considered a demonstration of real culinary intelligence. You were not hiding behind expensive ingredients. You were showing that you understood what your ingredients could do. By the 1950s, it had all but disappeared from both ends of the table. Blancmange powder arrived on supermarket shelves and removed the need for 2 days of patient soaking. Angel Delight came in the 1960s and finished the job entirely. Why wait 2 days for a wobble when a sachet and a pint of cold milk could produce something similar in 4 minutes? That jelly mold your nan kept at the very back of the kitchen cupboard, the ornate ceramic one, with the elaborate pattern pressed into the inside that you never once saw her actually use, was almost certainly bought for a flummery. By the time you were old enough to ask about it, nobody in the house could remember what it was for. That is how completely and how quickly we lost it. Number 9. Deviled kidneys. If you walked into a prosperous British household on a Sunday morning in 1910, the sideboard in the dining room would have held a chafing dish of deviled kidneys. Butter, mustard, cayenne, Worcestershire sauce, the sharp mineral heat of lamb's kidneys cooked fast and fierce and served immediately on thick toast. That was breakfast. That was entirely normal. That was considered the mark of a well-run household. Deviled kidneys survived the First World War. They survived the Second. They survived rationing, when kidneys were one of the few proteins available in any reliable quantity, and British families were glad of them. They sat on the menus of bed and breakfasts, railway hotel dining rooms, and seaside boarding houses well into the 1960s, ordered without embarrassment by people who knew exactly what they were eating and why they liked it. Then something shifted. And it shifted with a speed that still surprises me when I think about it. The trigger was prosperity, which is a strange thing to blame for the death of a good dish. As working families through the 60s and 70s found they could afford to be selective about their protein, the cuts of the animal that had previously been eaten out of necessity began carrying a different meaning. Kidneys were the food of harder times, of smaller wages, and emptier larders, of making do, and once a food becomes associated with not having enough, the people who finally have enough tend to stop eating it rather quickly, regardless of whether it actually tastes good, which deviled kidneys absolutely do. The sauce alone deserves better than the obscurity it has fallen into. Butter loosened with a splash of stock, sharpened with English mustard, heated through with cayenne, and anchored with Worcestershire. It is one of the finest savoury preparations British cooking ever produced. Restaurants, rediscovering it today, charge £14 a plate and call it a classic revival. Your nan called it Tuesday breakfast. She was right then. They are right now. The kidneys were never the problem. Number 8. Cock-a-leekie soup. Most people know cock-a-leekie as Scottish. Fewer know it spent 2 centuries feeding the north of England nearly as enthusiastically. And almost nobody talks about the prunes. Cock-a-leekie is a broth of chicken and leeks, long simmered until the chicken falls from the bone. That much is reasonably well known. What people consistently leave out, and what I think is secretly the whole point of everything, is the prunes. A small handful added to the pot in the last 30 minutes. They soften, release dark, jammy sweetness into the broth, and create a depth and complexity nothing else can produce. The prunes sound wrong, they taste extraordinary. That is very often how the best traditional British cooking works. An old hen past laying, costing next to nothing at the market, simmered for 3 hours with leeks and those few prunes, fed 4 people twice. The second day was always better. The dish retreated northward as English cooking grew uncertain about anything crossing a border. It retreated further when the old hen disappeared from butchers and was replaced by the uniform supermarket chicken. An old hen has flavour a young broiler cannot match. Without it, kokaliki is pleasant soup. With it, it is something close to remarkable. Number 7. Spotted Dick Right. We are going to be adults about this. I know what you are thinking. I thought it too. But Spotted Dick is a serious pudding with a serious history, and it deserves better than 3 decades of snickering. Sweet, self-raising flour, sugar, currants, and enough milk to bring it together into a soft, yielding cylinder, steamed for 2 hours, and served in thick slices with proper custard. The currants are the spots. It is not funny, it is a pudding. Suet puddings were the backbone of the British school dinner and the works canteen from the 1940s through the 70s. Cheap, filling, warming, and perfectly scalable. The industrial food system that followed replaced school dinner ladies with contractors, then replaced contractors with chilled, ready-to-serve portions. They swapped sweat pudding for individually wrapped sponge cake and called it modernization. The sponge contains more sugar, less nutrition, and arrives in non-recyclable plastic. Spotted Dick steamed for 2 hours in a proper kitchen is one of the finest things British cooking ever produced. We swapped it for shrink-wrapped sponge fingers, and I remain, years later, genuinely furious about it. Number 6. Bloater Paste. Great Yarmouth was once the bloater capital of Britain. The bloater is a whole herring, lightly salted and cold smoked in a way unique to that coastline, producing a fish of extraordinary, subtly smoky flavour. Not a kipper, gentler, more complex, and considerably harder to find. Bloater paste was made by pounding smoked bloater flesh with butter, anchovy, cayenne, and lemon until smooth, pressed into small stoneware jars and sealed under clarified butter. Shippams of Chichester industrialized it in the early 20th century, and by the 1950s, bloater paste was as common as Marmite. Every corner shop stocked it. Then the North Sea herring stocks collapsed. 1970s fishing quotas devastated communities from Yarmouth to Aberdeen. The raw material became scarce, then unavailable at the scale Shippams required. They discontinued the product quietly. Within a decade, most people under 30 had never heard of a bloater. The Great Yarmouth fishing fleet that supplied those jars for generations no longer exists in any meaningful sense. What remains is memory and the occasional artisan producer working at tiny scale. It deserved better. The whole coast deserved better. Number 5. Frumenti. 1,000 years. Frumenti was eaten in Britain for 1,000 years. It appears in medieval manuscripts, in Saxon harvest festival records, in Tudor household accounts, eaten by everyone from peasants to kings, and it disappeared from British kitchens within living memory. Cracked wheat soaked overnight, simmered slowly in milk with cinnamon, nutmeg, and a pinch of saffron. Dried fruit toward the end, sugar or honey to finish, somewhere between a porridge and a pudding, eaten warm from a bowl with cream or a little ale stirred through. The taste is extraordinary. The wheat has a nuttiness that oats do not possess. The slow simmer in milk gives richness without heaviness. The spices speak directly to 1,000 years of British harvest celebration. Frumenti vanished for the simplest reason. Britons stopped buying wheat berries. When grain arrived pre-milled and pre-packaged, the connection between cook and ingredient was severed. You cannot make frumenti with flour. When the whole grain stopped being available in ordinary shops, frumenti became unmakeable in any practical sense. Some health food shops stock wheat berries now, marketed as ancient grains, as though they require a special vocabulary to justify buying them. Your nan would have found this baffling. She would have found most of what we have done to British food baffling. Number 4. Haslet. Haslet, a spiced pork loaf from Lincolnshire, eaten cold in sandwiches sliced thin between buttered bread with a smear of mustard and nothing else required. Made from minced pork, sage, onion, salt and pepper, formed into a loaf wrapped in caul fat. The lacy membrane from the pig's stomach that basts the loaf as it roasts, and baked until firm. The caul fat crisps and clings to the outside. The interior is soft, deeply savoury, herby from the sage. With that particular sweetness, properly seasoned pork develops in the hands of someone who knows what they are doing. Every Lincolnshire butcher made haslet as a standard product, as expected, as sausages and bacon. You bought it by the slice, weighed on the scale, wrapped in greaseproof paper. Hazlitt did not travel beyond Lincolnshire and the surrounding counties. The butchers knew how to make it. Their apprentices knew how to make it. When those butchers retired and the shops closed through the recession of the 80s and 90s, that knowledge went with them. You can technically find Hazlitt now, but the supermarket version lacks the cool fat that defines the proper thing. It is Hazlitt in the same way that a photograph of your nan is your nan. It looks familiar, it is not the same. Number 3. Treacle Posset. Before Calpol, before Benylin, before any branded syrup in a plastic measuring cap, there was treacle posset, and it worked. Heat a mug of full-fat milk until hot but not boiling. Stir in a generous teaspoon of black treacle. That is it. The treacle swirls through the hot milk in dark glossy ribbons and dissolves into something warm, faintly bitter and deeply comforting. You drank it at bedtime, when you had a cough, when the cold was settling into your chest. You drank it when your nan looked at you with that specific expression that meant she had a remedy, and you were going to drink it whether you liked the idea or not. Black treacle contains iron, calcium, and magnesium in genuinely bioavailable forms. Victorian physicians recommended it for respiratory complaints and anemia. District nurses in the 1950s kept small tins in their bags for elderly patients on restricted diets. This is not folklore. It is documented. It works. The pharmaceutical industry built a billion-pound market in branded cold remedies through the 70s and 80s. Treacle posset costs 4 pence a cup. The branded nighttime syrups that replaced it cost £4 a bottle and contain, in many cases, the same active compounds alongside a great deal of proprietary branding. That knowledge did not disappear because something better came along. It disappeared because something more profitable came along. Number 2. Wet Nelly. There is a very good chance that if you were not born in Liverpool or raised by someone who was, you have never heard of Wet Nelly. This is a loss that Liverpool itself has not yet fully reckoned with. Wet Nelly is a Liverpool bread pudding unlike bread pudding, as most people understand it. Layers of stale bread spread with jam, pressed together, topped with rough short crust pastry made from the baker's offcuts. Baked until the pastry is golden and the bread underneath is soft, dense, and yielding. A working port city's food made from bakery waste at the end of the day, sold cheaply from behind glass counters. It cost almost nothing. It tasted of Liverpool the way nothing else quite managed to. The bakeries that made it were small, family-run, specific to streets and neighbourhoods. They began closing in the late 1960s as supermarket bread took hold. Wet Nelly required a baker who knew the recipe, had off-cut pastry from the day's baking, and had yesterday's stale bread. Remove any one element and the dish becomes impossible. By 1980, it had largely vanished even from Liverpool. Some foods are so tied to a place and a way of life that when the way of life changes, the food cannot follow. Wet Nelly was one of those foods. I find that genuinely heartbreaking, and I am not even from Liverpool. Number 1. Boiled bacon with parsley sauce. Before roast beef became the default Sunday centerpiece, before the supermarket made every cut of every animal available without reference to season or tradition, the Sunday dinner of the British working family was quite often boiled bacon with parsley sauce. And it was better than you were imagining. A collar or a hock, soaked overnight to draw out the salt, simmered low and long with an onion, a bay leaf, a few peppercorns, and whatever root vegetables needed using. 2 hours, sometimes 3. The house filled with that particular smell. Savory and clean and deeply reassuring. That means something significant is being prepared, and dinner is not far away. The parsley sauce was made in the same pot, cooking liquor drawn off and used as the base for a white sauce, thickened with butter and flour, finished with a generous fistful of flat parsley chopped fine. It absorbed the flavour of everything the bacon had given to that water over 2 hours of slow heat. It was not a sauce from a packet. It was a sauce made from the dish itself, cheap, forgiving, nourishing, a meal that used every element of its own cooking process to produce something far greater than the sum of its parts. The roast beef replaced it as prosperity increased, and cheap cuts became associated with hardship. The chicken replaced it when supermarkets made whole birds affordable. The ready meal replaced everything eventually, as it always does. Boiled bacon with parsley sauce never got a revival. It never appeared on a gastropub menu with a clever description. It just quietly stopped being made, in the way that the most modest and most honest things often do. I think it deserves to come back more than anything else on this list. Try it once, and you will understand immediately why your nan's generation never needed to be told what Sunday dinner was. They already knew. Here is my challenge, and I mean this seriously. Try one of these this week. Not a restaurant version, not a supermarket approximation. Find a recipe, buy the ingredients, and make it from scratch. Make the parsley sauce in the bacon water. Make the peas pudding from dried split peas. Get a bag of wheat berries and make frumenti on a Sunday morning. These dishes were not forgotten by accident. They were replaced deliberately by industries that profited from the replacement. Every time you make one of them, even imperfectly, even just once, you are pushing back against 50 years of being told that your grandmother's kitchen held nothing worth preserving. It held everything worth preserving. Your nan knew things, proper things, things that took generations to learn and one generation to forget. The sealed butter pot, the stock that costs nothing, the sauce made from the same water as the meat. These are not primitive techniques. They are elegant ones developed by people who could not afford waste and who turned that constraint into something beautiful. Come back and tell me which one you tried. I already know it will taste better than you expected, but I want to hear you say it. I'm Charles. This is UK Nostalgia. I will see you in the next one.